Hi, my name is Kate Tellers, and I believe that joy is infinite. So an uplifter is someone who finds joy in your joy.
Welcome to the Uplifters podcast. Every week, I get to talk to a woman who inspires me. Oftentimes, I meet those women through the women they've inspired. But this time, I get to bring you somebody straight from my own life. Now, truth be told, she's perhaps nominated more guests for this show than anyone else. I've been playing in my mind with the idea of constellations of inspiring women and what those shapes look like. And there's a whole Melanie constellation up in the uplifter sky. Melanie and I have long felt connected in our little constellation. We spend years together working, and more than that, we feel a little cosmically connected because we share a birthday just a few years apart. But we also happen to share some kind of gnarly childhoods that we've mined to find purpose and strength. So it is just a real joy to get to introduce you today to my friend, Melanie Cohen. Melanie, welcome.
Yay. Thank you. I'm so happy I'm here right now.
Melanie is currently translating her 2 decades of coaching into a program that I find incredibly exciting. And what she's doing is she's helping people manage their health and wellness by removing clutter from their lives in all these different domains. And so we have lots and lots to talk about, Melanie, but I want to start back at the beginning because I think, like me, your beginning really formed a foundation for your purpose. So tell me what it was like to grow up as little Mel.
Well, you said the beginning, so I'm going to say I've been told on a regular basis that I was conceived on an acid trip. So, and I need to put that out there because my father's drug use will come up later in the conversation. And I turned out okay, I guess, all things considered.
Turned out great.
Okay, so yeah, my father was an addict, but what it started with, my father's actually incredibly smart. He has a PhD in chemical engineering and applied physics and was doing great things in the area of clean fuels in the 70s and, like really progressive, really great things. But my father's dream was always to be like the macher, in Yiddish, like the head, like the head of the family, the guy who took care of everybody. And not a lot of scientists make $1 million. And he wanted me to have nice things, my mom to have nice things. He wanted to send me to private school. I was a gymnast. Gymnastics is not cheap between the leotards, the coaches, the personal trainers, the choreographers, the guy who puts your music together, the sleepaway camp. My father's dream was always to, big cars, big flashy things. And as a result, the only way to make enough money was for him to sell drugs on the side. And it was like so normal in my life. It was like completely normal that people traipsed in and out of our West Side apartment to buy drugs. My parents smoked pot. I never saw them drink alcohol. Like, my other friends' families having like scotch before dinner or after dinner, like didn't make sense to me. And so he was able to, in some cases, pay for my coaches by selling them drugs or giving them bonuses in drugs. And so things got bad. I will never forget the day that my father asked me to come into his office. He always had an office in the house. And we walked in and he points, he had filing cabinet on one side, all bookshelves, on the other side, all filing cabinets on top of each other. And that many filing cabinets because the man had way too much paper. And he pointed to the 4th row and to the top cabinet, the 3rd shelf, and said, "Do you know that?" And I was like, "Yeah, 4, 3, 2, whatever I needed to know." And he said, "Go into the drawer." And I climbed the ladder, opened the drawer, and there's a paper bag. And he said, "So that's just in case anything ever happens." And all this time, I thought there was like $10,000 in there. I was telling my dad, "I'm going to tell your story. I'm going to talk about you." And he said, "No, Melanie, that was $50,000. I don't know at 15 years old that I knew what just in case meant, like what potentially could happen. I think now, as a woman in her 50s, I know exactly all of the things that could have happened. So I feel like I grew up in a space where there was money scarcity. And it sounds crazy to hear someone who went to private school and went to gymnastics camp and then went off to a private college, that money scarcity was a thing, but it really was. It really was a thing for me. I went off to college. My father's drug addiction was so bad. He went to rehab numerous times. They stopped paying college. And at the end of my junior year, I was asked to not come back. And the bursar of the college had me sign a promissory note. I was 20. I didn't know what I was signing. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was that my parents were behind by $18,000, which doesn't sound like a lot now. But in 1990, that was a tremendous amount of money. My parents and I became estranged, and I was out on my own without a college degree, thinking like, what am I ever going to do with my life if I don't have a college degree? I am never going to make any money. I worked as a nanny, which I loved doing, and I found a job in retail. I was able to get promoted relatively quickly, but I was paying off debts that were beyond normal student loan payments. And I spent a lot of my young part of my career just assuming that there was only so far I was going to be able to make it. One, because I didn't have a degree, and two, I didn't want to talk about that. And it was years before I was able to start admitting to people in my life, well, I only completed 3 years. And what I was in college to study was psychology. I was studying psychology and I was studying exercise science because I wanted to be like the great sports psychologist one day. And that wasn't going to happen without a master's, if not a PhD. So I just kept trudging along. And then I got to a point in my life where no longer being a gymnast meant that I was someone completely different. And, I weighed nearly 75 pounds more than I did being in my top shape at gymnastics. And I took my daughter to her very first gymnastics class, and all I saw was my reflection in the mirror. I was like, what happened to you? What's wrong with you? And in my head, all the things that happened to you are not a reason for being over 200 pounds. And started my weight loss journey and immediately was recruited to come work for Weight Watchers, which seemed like a really good fit for me because I was helping people. I was like doing the thing I went to college to do. I stayed for a really long time. I stayed because I loved the members. I loved my colleagues, but I wasn't making any money. And I stuck around, and I stuck around way longer than the person would have said should have. I left when the time was right for me. And I recognize that now. But I think what it has done is left me over and over again putting my worth with financial worth. And so starting my own business was really hard because there was like this fear, now I'm the one that's responsible.
Yeah. And if I don't make enough money, then it's a direct reflection on my personal worth.
100%. And go right back to my father owned his own business. He owned two businesses.
One on the books, one not.
One was on the up and up and one was not on the up and up. And because he never made it as a business person, I think I also got into my head. Most people would say I'm more like my father than I am like my mother. And so there was this assumption, well, my father failed at business. That means I'm going to fail at business. So we're talking about a tremendous amount of mental clutter. And the past 2 years of, starting my business have all been about removing clutter. And for me, the mental and the financial clutter.
So much of what you're saying, I relate to. And I think these are stories in different forms that I've heard from so many uplifters. And I think this money one and a scarcity mindset around money, there will not be enough money. I'm not worthy of enough money is one that a lot of us struggle with.
Most of it has been about knowing that I am worthy to make money. Have you read Profit First?
Yeah.
That helped a lot. Just the idea of pay yourself first. It's like, I was always the last person that got paid. Even when it came to making money working for somebody else, it was like, we're going to pay the rent and we're going to pay for the phone bills and we're going to pay for the kids' college. And that was something that was really important to me. Like we let ourselves go into a little bit of debt, sending the kids off to college because I said, I am not going to do to you what my dad did to me. You are going to have a 4-year degree. What you do with it afterwards is completely up to you. If you want to go to graduate school, that's on your own. But being able to say, I am worthy. Like I was worthy doing all the hard work that it took to lose weight. I was worthy of so many other things in my life, but somehow, because I came from a family that didn't have a lot of money, and I feel so badly saying that sometimes because I know how well I lived on my father not having a lot of money. But you're like only as rich as your poorest friend, I think is the way I looked at it going to private school. And then, so much of it is like what you're thinking is not what other people are seeing.
Mm-hmm. That can really impact our sense of belonging, which is so critical in those adolescent years and really can shape how we feel about our sense of belonging throughout all of life.
100%. Yeah.
What helped you feel safe around money?
I don't know if I feel safe around money. That's a really, like, wow, talk about challenging me. Or maybe money is not safe around me. I don't know. One way or the other, I'm going to have to find safety in it because there's no safety in not having money. Mm-hmm. So what would be so bad if I made some money and saw, like, does this feel good? As opposed to like holding yourself back. And I think that's part of it is as you strip away the mental clutter, you're more able to see with clarity the reality. That mental clutter, all the self-limiting beliefs, the things that we tell ourselves that aren't true. Once I start removing those things, then the real me, the real thoughts are there.
Yeah. And getting down to the essence. So what are some of the thoughts that you needed to break through to get to truth?
So funny. I am putting together a workshop I'm doing with teen girls on Friday, teen dancers. We're doing a self-confidence workshop. I'm like, how do you even explain self-confidence, self-worth, self-value? Like, how do you even explain those to a bunch of teenagers who, when you say self-worth or self-value, probably think, the things that we first think of, I'm going to get a massage, I'm going to get my nails done, we're going to do a little activity, writing down all the mental clutter on a piece of paper, crumbling it up, throwing it away, and about the things that scare them most, that make them the saddest, the things that make them the angriest, and what stresses them out the most. And I did those 4 questions because those are the questions I ask myself on a regular basis. What's making you angry? What's scaring you? What's worrying you? I don't end with those. Once I get all that out and throw it away, then I got to go to the 4 questions like, what makes you happy? What are you most proud of? And it is okay if I say, I am proud I'm making money. I signed another client, not I'm proud someone wanted me, but I am proud I did all the work to get that client and I'm going to get money for it too.
What a distinction. So if you started your own journey toward clearing clutter by looking at your financial mindsets, what other domains have you had to clear in order to thrive?
So in all fairness, when I decided I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to have a program and I'm going to help people get healthy by removing the clutter in their lives, the financial was not the one I was thinking about. I think that I was doing that, but I wasn't really conscious that I was working through the financial clutter because I heard clutter. I was going to help people and we were going to talk about the physical clutter, all the stuff around them. We were going to talk about the digital clutter, all the stuff on our phones and our computers. We were going to talk about mental clutter. And I hadn't been thinking about the financial piece until I was working with one of my very first clients. And she said, but I don't have clutter. And I said, well, let's talk about it because everyone has clutter, even if like you could have the cleanest home. You can have the tidiest space. You could be that person who could like put your finger on the floor and eat off of it. There's still some clutter somewhere. And that's when she was like, you could see like the head explode. It was like, oh, I have financial clutter. And as she's talking to me about it, I'm like, I don't know if I'm qualified to help her with this. I'm not a financial advisor, but as we start clearing the clutter, we become more thoughtful about the things that we buy, you know? And so we don't buy everything we see because it might be a great idea. We take our time, we put qualifications on. I need to wait 24 hours before I hit enter on Amazon, or, you know, I have to go home and then I have to go back to the store if I really want that thing. And her clutter was coming from shopping, and it wasn't over the top in her home. She saw that as something she could control, but it was going to be easier to control if she was shopping less, and the shopping less was going to help her fiscally. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. I understand that for myself. So that was a really nice conversation with a client, taking me in a place that I didn't know I was going.
As you think about all these different domains of clutter that you, your clients, all of us have, what are some of the process points that people or you go through to help clear clutter in any area?
I mentioned before, my father had like a dozen filing cabinets, and he he says he has like dozens of banker boxes full of papers in his apartment in Florida. I'm like, you don't need those anymore, Dad. Yes, I do. You never know, this chemical equation or this mathematical equation or the diagrams that I created. I have to remind him on a regular basis, there's the internet. If it's your patent, like you own the patent, it's online. So he's having a hard time coming around on that. But I realized that there was clutter around me growing up, predominantly from him. My mother is now probably a stage 4 or 5 hoarder. And she would be so angry with me talking about this, but I have to be real. The reality is that as much shame as I felt over my body when I was over 200 pounds is how much shame people hold for what their homes look like.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many causes behind clutter that this isn't like, oh, she's crazy, she has clutter, or, oh, what's wrong with her? You know, stress can lead to clutter. Depression can lead to clutter. Exhaustion can lead to clutter. Perfectionism can lead to clutter, which sounds so counterintuitive to so many people. But when I think about my mother was a librarian before she became a stay-at-home mom. Talk about how perfectly everything is, the Dewey Decimal System and the card files and everything in its place. That's how my mother wanted to live her life. And I'll also remember she went back to graduate school when I was a kid, and she got a master's in computer science in 1977. Like that was a big thing, women in science. And I remember she took evening classes, and she would come home and she would take her notes and transfer them to a composition notebook. She would have red, green, blue, and black Pilot Razor pens, and her notes would be in outline form perfectly. So I know that this is a woman who craves exactness. And what happens when you start having clutter, when you operate that way? If you can't get it all done and you can't get it done right, you don't even get started, and you are paralyzed from doing anything. And so that's where so many people's clutter comes from, is the complete paralysis in being able to tackle it, whether it's physical, paper, digital, emotional.
Wow. Yeah. It's just too big to even start. And so I love that answer. And I feel like your mother's story is probably very relatable to a lot of people, especially as you think about it across all these different domains. So for those who are completely overwhelmed by the scale of the problem in any area, how do you get them to think about where to begin?
There's a lot to uncover there. One is like, it doesn't have to be done all at once. You know, It's just like my weight. I didn't wake up one morning over 200 pounds. Like, that took time, and I was not going to lose that weight overnight. When I went back to working out, I wasn't going to get strong overnight. Everything has to be done in ridiculously simple goals. I love to use those words, ridiculously simple. Like, if you said the goal out loud, it would sound to someone else like, really? That's tomorrow afternoon for 10 minutes. But that's what we need to hear,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So whether you say something like, okay, every day at 5 o'clock, I will turn the little, kitchen timer on, and I will do 10 minutes of just getting through something. 10 minutes every day. At the end of the week, we've spent over an hour, decluttering. But there are a lot of different perspectives. They were like, focus on just one space. And one space doesn't mean my bedroom is a mess. It doesn't mean the closet is a mess. It means that one shelf, or this much of hanging clothing, that it has to be ridiculously simple, because eventually ridiculously simple builds on itself, or more confident. 10 minutes, I can do 20. I can do 25. And then eventually we get to the point where 10 minutes is again enough. But I think, I have my favorite strategy, and it's the 30-day decluttering challenge. 30-day decluttering challenge. So day 1 of the month, you get rid of one thing, because everybody has one thing they can get rid of. And then you increase each day. Day 2, you get rid of 2 things. Day 5, 5 things. Day 7, 7 things. And if you do it for 30 days, you've gotten rid of over 450 items, which is huge. It's huge. I'm a fan of, you do as much as you can. You just want to do the first 7 days. You only want to do it on weekends. Great. It's about making progress. And 30 items is kind of scary. But if you've started with one and you start building up, 30 is like, I got that in my sleep.
How is your life different since you started practicing this consistent paring down of both mental and physical clutter?
Clutter gets in the way of us being efficient. Like, I can finish things faster. I never had the space that my parents had. I also lived with people that wouldn't declutter as much as I would, given the opportunity. Bill, my husband, he'll declutter anything if it means I'm going to be happy. I mean, I found the right guy, but I'm not going to make him get rid of everything. My husband's been a book collector for a very long time. He likes to collect author-signed first editions. I am the person who would say, let's declutter the books, but I'm not going to ask anybody to get rid of it, because books are so sentimental. It's like, we love to hold them. And I know, I don't ever want to read on a Kindle. I always want to be a book person. There's only so many books you need to have in a New York City apartment if it's not 2,500 square feet with 12-foot ceilings. That was my parents' house. They had that many books because they could. So it has created clarity. Things happen faster. Like, food gets cooked faster. It gets cleaned up faster. We waste less food. The refrigerator doesn't, I always grew up with the refrigerator has to look full, because that also comes from that scarcity thing. And my mother was raised by someone who lived through the Depression. My mother lived through the Cold War, although I also grew up during the Cold War. And there are all those, you have to have lots of cans of food in case of nuclear fallout. Actually, we had a deep freezer in the house. Half of it was pot because my father was selling it. And the other half was all this food my mother needed to have, because you never know what's going to happen in life. Mom, if there's nuclear fallout, I don't think any of that food in the freezer is going to be any good. So it's amazing how much it's changed for me. There is a statistic that the average person spends an entire year of their life looking for lost items. I don't do that anymore.
You know what you have.
Every once in a while, I misplace something, but I know what I have and I know where I have it. So I'm not spending a ton of time looking for lost things. A year, is that crazy?
That's wild. And it's probably, I feel like I spend that much every year. And I'm a minimalist, so I can't even imagine people who have a lot of stuff.
Right. And I'm so happy you mentioned that, because I always fear that when people consider working with me, that they think that I am going to make them become a minimalist. And I don't think anybody should live a Spartan lifestyle unless that's what they want.
Right.
I have to be a values-based clutter coach. We're going to make this be a space that you can operate in that enhances your life, and you're going to get rid of the stuff that doesn't do that for you.
And so it becomes very personal, but it also becomes an opportunity to reconnect with our values and to live in greater alignment with our values.
Yes. And the thing is that there's so much value put on objects, whether it's actual value, like that's a Yadro piece over there, or that Yadro piece belonged to my grandmother, or that Yadro piece belonged to my grandmother. We gave it to her because it has a gymnast on it. And that is one of the only things that I took from my grandmother, because that was what represented our relationship. But so many of us feel so much energy. Our things have energy. And the energy that comes out of things that belong to someone before is incredible energy. But the question is, like, how much of that do I need? Like, does my grandmother want me to be overwhelmed by all of her stuff? Or does she want me to enjoy the pieces that I have?
That's such a good clarifying question there. It was interesting. My 16-year-old yesterday asked me for a number. She really likes a rule. And she said, Mom, if you can tell me a number of clothing items that I should have, it'll make it much easier for me to decide what to keep and what to donate. And I said, I can't do that. I was like, I would do you a real disservice if I gave you a locked in number, but I can give you some mental filters to help you consider what's worth keeping and what isn't.
Right.
And so it was a really interesting conversation to have with her at this age, because I think it's something, I think we all like a nice, strong guideline, but I also think we need to develop a tolerance for trusting our own instincts.
Yeah.
And so much of your courage journey, which is essentially, I think, the theme of every episode of this podcast, is trusting that you are enough, trusting that you have enough, trusting that you are of worth and value inherently. And that takes a lot of courage. And so I'm curious, at this point in your journey, you've gone out on your own, you've started your own business, you've found a space in which you are having tremendous impact. You're doing new things like telling your story on a podcast. Where are you excited to raise courage next?
I was having a conversation with someone recently. I have a friend who's been on your podcast who has a very successful organizing business. And I tell her on a regular basis,
Sonia Weissapple, listen to that episode. Yes.
Yes. But I've told her, I don't want to work as hard as you do. And I know the first time I said it to her, she was like, I'm sorry, what? And I said, well, I'm 54 years old. And I know that I can work for the next 20 years, but I don't know if I can work for the next 20 years if I work as hard as you do. So I felt like that was a very courageous thing for me to say. Like, so this means it's going to take longer to make money. It also means that I have to be willing to not make $1 kabillion doing this, because I'm not willing to do that much hard work. And I think that like goes against everything that we've taught, have a good Protestant work ethic. She's, she always gives it the good try. And so I am giving it the good try, or I'm doing. This is not trying, this is doing. But my ability to say, I'm not willing to work 60 to 70 hours a week for this, for me was an incredibly courageous thing. Mm-hmm. Then I had a conversation with a friend. We were talking about that. And I said, when I'm successful and I hire people to work for me, I am going to pay them what they're worth. And even if I pay on a scale that's completely different than everything that we hear on Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and all those places, I will overpay, because I don't feel like the people who make the biggest difference get enough money. Mm-hmm. Having been someone who worked in retail and then someone who worked in the coaching role that she did, people that are with the consumer, mm-hmm. the people who are with the people that pay our bills are the ones that get paid the least. That's not going to happen in my business.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you're so right. I mean, the service provider discrepancy in pay in our country is devastating to our society in general, because women are not empowered to have financial freedom. And ultimately, that has painful effects on the entire family, certainly on our children, but on society in general.
Yeah. I don't want to be a part of that, No. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. Yeah.
What I hear in that is you saying, I want to live in accordance with my values. And that if I'm going to have this financial standard for myself, I want to contribute to that for others too.
Yeah.
What are 3 things that energize you, Melanie?
What are 3 things that energize me? Coffee, music music, like I will sing and dance along to anything, but I am still fixated very much in the late 70s to early 90s of punk, ska, and new wave music. And I know that there's been a lot of new music since then. But every time I see a meme about a Gen Xer being like, I don't listen to anything after 1992, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. So food, definitely. And you know when I like food because I sing and dance. So I think a lot of like those creature comforts of, like food and coffee. But at the end of the day, it's just spending time with my friends and family. Like I love a game night. I love doing like all of the stupid fun things.
It sounds far from stupid. It sounds really wise. And it sounds like you are designing a new way of healthy living, and talk about a legacy to leave your daughters.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. I'm not cleaning their rooms for them. I learned a long time ago that what their space stressed me out, but that didn't mean that they had to live a different way. But just keep your door closed. I don't want to look at it. You live however you want to. I just don't want to see it. It's fine.
Yeah. I know when I complain to my kids about those little things, my older one says, Mom, every teen is going to rebel. Be glad that this is how I've chosen to do it. Like, you got it, girl.
And having formerly been a teenager, yeah, she's right.
Yeah. My rebellions were not so cute or legal.
Well, I always used to ask the question, how does a teenager rebel when their parent is a drug dealer?
They become...
I don't know.
Fundamentalist.
I always feel, oh gosh, wouldn't that be like Family Ties? Where Michael J. Fox played Alex P. Keaton. He was the Republican to his Democrat parents. That's exactly it. Like there were times I got in trouble. I showed up late, I told a fib, but yeah, the whole drugs and alcohol thing weren't going to be. My father's an addict. I am afraid of being an addict. Mm-hmm. His father was a gambler. For me, it was food. Like we went from, the craps table to crack cocaine to food. And food was always safer than...
From craps to crack to crackers.
There you go. I think that might be the title of our book.
Maybe your daughters will get obsessed with croquet or something.
Oh, crochet. This is what gives me life, is like silly conversations like this too.
Yeah, same. I adore you, my friend. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
I adore you so very much.
Thank you for listening to the Uplifters podcast. If you're getting a boost from these episodes, please share them with the uplifters in your life, and then join us in conversation over at theuplifterspodcast.com. Head over to Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast, and follow, and rate our show. It'll really help us connect with more uplifters, and it'll ensure you never miss one of these beautiful stories. Mwah! Big love.
Painted water sunshine with rosemary and thyme. Dwell in the perplexing, though you find it vexing. Toss a star and hover, be your own best lover. Relish in a new prime, plant a tree in springtime. Dance with idle hindsight, bring the sun to twilight. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up, whoa. Lift you up.
Beautiful.
I cried. It's that little thing you did with your voice.
Right, in the pre-chorus, right?
I was like...
Mommy,
I had to cry quietly.
Mommy, stop crying. You're disturbing the peace.